Hi, Zizaran here with another episode of Path of Exile University. Today we're going to cover gearing. Other episodes that are still to be done. Tomorrow is going to be Everything Explained, which is extremely good for new players, where we do basically 7 hours, it's a very long one, where we do a new character and take it to maps. And then we have a tips and tricks for League start with Steel Mage on the 4th at 4 p.m. So, today is going to be gearing. I will be your professor this evening, and we are going to be swapping between this and a thing called Path of Exile to give some examples. So, this lesson is about exploring gearing options and outlining the ones you want to use. And we're going to cover gearing from a solo playstyle perspective, because if you can do it on SSF, it's even easier in Trade League. And gearing in trade is generally the same as in SSF, but you have the option to just grind for currency and buy what you want instead. And there's so many good ways to craft in SSF. So when gearing a character, you don't really need to aim for the final gear immediately. You usually do like a step-by-step situation. And being self-sufficient at gearing means you'll almost magically just have more gear than you need and get a lot more currency in Trade League too. And for the most part, crafting in PoE is just one big gamble. There are some guaranteed crafts, but especially on most top-end stuff, it is a big gamble. But yeah, for more in-depth lesson about how to start a league and start your gearing, the last class this semester will be tips and tricks with Steel Mage, like how to set yourself up for a strong league start. So, crafting is modifying an item ranging from a guaranteed outcome to utter randomness, and the crafting bench is always a guaranteed result. This is generally the weakest in strength, but offers guaranteed methods of getting some mechanics or effect, and especially whether using more currency, you can sort of step-by-step guarantee some things. So, or at least eventually with enough currency used. Some crafts are 80% of the strength of the non-crafted counterpart, while being sometimes 1,000th of the cost. For example, Eldraine mana cost rings are very, very cheap to craft. And then learn the crafting bench stuff will generally have every item slot with one craft. Like, that's very important. And the number one important thing to learn is that you can use the crafting bench on white items. That means that early on League Start, if you have just a white leather belt, you can put lightning resist on that. And then a 3-socket or a 4-link helmet, you can put fire resist on that. And the reason that's so good is you can actually resist cap just by helping Alira and crafting res on all your gear. And that can then take you very far until you start finding rares. Like, the item doesn't need to be blue with an open suffix or rare with an open suffix for you to use your crafting bench on it. So just knowing that gives you such a leg up. So, we're not going to be cover currencies and what they do in this. We've already covered that in past ones. It's also in the help section in-game. But yeah, we have earlier lessons, so you can check for that if you need to know what each currency does. So, gearing is generally not instant, and you're going to be looking for certain things and replacing items as you go. Whenever you see my characters, you see like a slow progression in gear. You know, I actually just thought of an idea. It'd be kind of cool for one league to just track every gear swap I do during a league and make like a time lapse of my gear progression throughout the league. That'd be kind of interesting. Leveling can be simplified to capping resistances and getting life mods while keeping up with the required sockets. And at some point, this is going to change, but not for the foreseeable future. Playing efficiently means that you spend less time, and the difference can be drastic. So what I mean by that is when you're a new player, you're going to be picking up almost everything. But you see endgame players are just running through things and picking up very little. And that means that you're basically, think of it as like spinning on a slot machine, right? Because you have infinite spins. You're just thinking about how many spins you get with a slot machine. So the number one tip to save time is to spend less time in town. And then the way I try to like pick up things I need is that if I really need new boots, I'll focus hard on new boots. But if I already have a glove, let's say that my glove on day one has like 72 life, 25 lightning resist, 13 cold, and an open suffix, I'm probably not going to be desperate to pick up every glove I find in the start, because I'm very unrealistic for me to find a new upgrade. Whereas if my boots are 1.3 life regen, 10% movement speed, and 7% cold res, I'm probably gonna pick up every boot, being like, dude, please, come on, give me something. So thinking like getting a rough idea for like where you're more likely to get an upgrade, is really, really good. Because even at the end game, you could technically identify the best glove in the game, but you're not very realistic to, so your time is better spent somewhere else. And you generally get 20 to 40 items per slot dropping during a leveling journey. Depends a little bit on the league and the league mechanic, and sometimes we'll have really good early crafting mechanics. But yeah. And using your crafting bench a lot will take you through the campaign very well. So you want to prioritize things that really feel good and make a big impact. This being movement speed, resist, and then life. And for weapon, that depends on your build. But obviously, if you're a cold dot spell, you want things like cold damage over time multiplier. You want damage over time, increased cold damage. Or if you're a weapon-based build, generally you're going to go for fizz. And it's very important here to have percentage fizz and flat fizz because they like affect each other. It's very different than a 1 having cold damage to spells and cold damage. And yeah, generally don't try to go for 6 good modifiers on an item. You just want to go for upgrades and prioritize that. And upgrading your life last through the campaign is really good as well. I generally care a lot about the biggest thresholds for me is 24, 42, and 60. So, something that's really important for gearing at low maps is essences. And assuming that the Atlas passives don't get changed, we have easy ways to guarantee that you're getting 1 essence per map, that they're higher level, that there's more essences inside that essence. And I think that's a little weird with essences is that you don't get better or more essences at tier 16s than you go at tier 1. So that means that just spamming tier 1 maps fast can be really good for gearing because you can just blast through them and you can end up stocking up a ton of essences. And then bases will matter a lot at some point. So there are different item level thresholds. So for example, item level 84 will be the max needed for resistances, right? That's when you can get the 46 to 48. And they very rarely add new thresholds for item levels. So currently item level 86 is the highest needed for anything. If you have an item level 100 item, that's not any different at the moment than item level 100, or than 86 until they add more. But they will eventually probably add item level 87, 88, etc. So lower item level things, like for example, 68, can't get the item level 86 resist, which goes up to 46 or 48. They can just get lower ones. And then the best item to craft on low item level things that where it's not as important is rings, because tier 1 life is something I can't remember exactly, but it's 50 or 55, and obviously the resists go pretty decent. So finding a ring that has 70 life and triple res with 20, 30 of each res is actually possible at 50 or 60. So they're very, very good early. Whereas, for example, energy shield gear, it really needs item level 86 for both shield and chest and a few other pieces for that you really want to invest heavily into it. And belts, amulets, and rings are always good to pick up, even if it's things like gold rings and stuff. The reason for that is because they're 1 slot item and you want to stack up a lot of alterations, both to roll your flasks, to roll gear, strong boxes. You want a lot of alterations. And yeah, especially with the way that ID scrolls now drop in stacks of 8 to 10, they're basically infinite. And if you are running out of wisdoms, remember that you can vendor blacksmiths and armorers and stuff for that, and transmutes. Let's see. Path of Exile. So early on, we can give some quick examples too for visual learners. So I generally, on most of my characters, really want Dex in my item. I want either Dex Int or Dex Strength because I really want to be able to roll Spell Suppression. Now, obviously, there could be some changes tonight with that, but Spell Suppression is currently overwhelmingly strong in the game. So we can see here are the different rolls. So that starts appearing as early as item level 46, and the highest one is up to tier 1. But that doesn't exist on any other stuff, on armor or int. So, well, we do hope that they eventually make it less mandatory, but we'll see. So let's see that I'm going to like try to craft some early boots, right? So we'll go strength next, why not? So early on, I'll have like low item level boots. Early on, straight up, you're just looking for any movement speed. Any movement speed. And for one of those wondering why spell suppression is so strong and what it does, if you have 100% spell suppression, all spells do half the damage to you. So early, you are literally looking for even just this is super good. Like the faster you go, bigger number, better person. You just want to go fast. And then eventually, early game crafting methods end up being let's go to like mid game. Oops, there's a helmet. I want a boot. Where did boots go? There. And then let's say we're around level 50. What I end up starting doing here is that I start keeping a lot of my essences and using that because you do get a decent amount of essences during the campaign. There. I was like, I don't need horror essence. So then, for example, best case scenario would be finding a zeal or a greed, but you're not very likely to find those, right? So boom, you already have pretty usable boots for like the mid game. So we're talking around like Chamber of Innocence, etc. And Chamber of Innocence is a very, very good spot. This is where we generally gear up and level up on hardcore. And that's because every like little area in the Chamber of Innocence has a blue pack. You start spawning Delirium, and yeah, you generally get quite often you encounter league mechanics as well as a lot of XP. So for new players to hardcore, I recommend leveling all the way to 50 there because you get so good XP, it happens very fast. And then you're able to pre-gear for Kitava. Because sometimes I'll see people like, I killed Kitava and now I have 50 fire rest and I died in Act 6. But it's always static. You don't sometimes lose 10% resist to Kitava and other times 60. It's not like, oh no, I lost 30 again. You always lose the same amount. So you want to make sure that you go in with 30% resist more than you need. Because the Act 6 is quite rippy. So don't kill Kitava and end up with like 30 lightning rest, right? But something that ends up being pretty good is every essence, whether it's trash or not, ends up being really good. So even like a tier 4 doubt essence, if you're using like 2 or 3, you can get lucky with it. And sometimes it can take a lot more. Like at the end of the day, Path of Exile is pretty RNG. Now here's an example of a very keepable boot. And that's because we do have the crafting bench. So at this point, even if I craft, I can use 2C to craft this. Now we have up to 19% MS, 70 life, and 35 fire rest. So normally I just like look for like bases, especially if I need links. I'll keep an eye out for that. Binding orbs obviously are very good for sorting your link issues early, but stuff like that, very, very nice to keep an eye out for. That's like medium gear. And then, yeah, suppression gear, extremely good example where you're trying to target suppression in either 1 or 2 resist or resist life with a craftable affix for that. And we always do in our build guides example gear. So normally we have early, mid, end game, and giga end game. Early game will normally just be like resist and life. Super easy. It'll just be like focus on resist. Mid game, then you're like, okay, try to get spell suppression capped. End game gives you like some pieces that are pretty reasonable. Then pieces will start being, you know, between 1 to 10 divines per. And ultra end game will be like, this is your best in slot item. This is unachievable for most people, but sometimes people that follow the guide end up maybe getting lucky with a drop or two, and they're like, what would be some really good drops? Like, I got like 20 divines now. What would be a really good thing to get? So we put in like super endgame options for that. And obviously that changes per person, right? What's mid game for me is different for somebody else. But like normally I would say like, you know, early game would be like white maps, mid game, yellow maps, end game. End game you would have like, well, mid game maybe early reds, and then end game is like, you know, doing tier 16s and able to do actual hard content. But it's gonna change from person to person. We can look at some like, you know, how I start looking at gear when I'm like entering maps real quick. So, like I said, I spam a lot of essences. And normally, you might now be wondering, well, Zizaran, what should I do with my essences? Do I upgrade them all to deafening? Like, deafening is really good. Boom, dude, 96 life. But the problem is, for one deafening, I get to use 9 screamings. So, for some things, wailings are fine, especially rings and amulets. Wailings are more than enough. Um, and, oh, I want to show, I'm going to boot up Path of Exile. I wasn't going to do this, but I really want to show this because it's such a good gearing thing that I don't feel like anyone else shows. We're booting it up. So, like I just said, wailings are really, really good.
Hello.
Hello. Now, let's say that I have a gold amulet, right?
For freedom.
All right, grab some essences. This works with amulets in particular, and you can use the essences. Let's see. So, wailings. We'll just grab some random ones. What was there? Kind of good.
Godslayer.
Buying some random gems. They cost 1 wisdom. This is very cheap. I'm not buying specific ones. So, obviously, I'm like, okay, let's say this is a negate amulet or whatever I want, right? Or an onyx amulet. And I'm like, boom. Okay, well, it's pretty trash, right? And actually, you could even use... Honestly, even weepings are not that bad for rings and amulets. So they would be like giga value if you have a lot of them running around. Like maybe you have a bunch of weeping doubts. Because the way these work is that they will guarantee one property regardless of item level. That means that you can use a deafening on an item level 2 gear. This will guarantee that amount of life. It'll have a high required level, however. The other things will be restricted to the item, whatever the item normally has. But with lower essences, it also forces lower item level. What that means, if I use a weeping on an item level 86, it cannot roll anything above item level 60 requirement. Very important to know. But now, for both rings and amulets, they come online very, very quickly. Now watch this. Boom! Selling it with a red, a green, and a blue gem gives me a white onyx amulet. Always onyx, cannot get a gate, turquoise, or all the other ones. But that means that I'm saving loads of scours, which early game, especially in Souls Offline, can be a big issue to get. And you maybe really struggle on getting amulets and rings. You find less of that than any other piece. So now I can use these. Like, they're very bad essences. I wouldn't want to use this on most things, right? Like 18 to 23 stuff wouldn't really be good. But boom, I could like maybe get something good with this. Because the big difference is that chests and shields and other things will have a like they basically come online later, right? Like you might actually care about having item level 72 or 77 chest. Whereas rings, they're really good from item level 50 onwards. So doing this can be a really, really good trick. There's no equivalent for rings except that remember you can turn any like iron ring into a ruby, sapphire, or topaz by vendoring it with a support gem. But then just doing like this, you're saving yourself a lot of scours. So if you are really poor one league, this can be really, really nice. And a good use for your like low level essences. And before you know it, you have a ring or amulet with like quite a lot of stats. Let's see. I don't think I need PoE for anything else. There. And then what about other gear? So obviously harvest, unless it gets changed this league, is in a bit of a weird spot, right? The amount of harvest currency you need for item level 68 is the same as the item level 86. That means I am traditionally saving that until I need it. And that is a little bit sad. But essence is also the same, but you do need early game gear, and essence is slightly less strong than harvest, I feel. So normally what I end up doing is screaming or tier 5, the one below. And then let's look at a slightly different item level. So now let's create some mid-game gear. So we'll do strength dex. And, you know, we'll have hydra skill. Maybe we have fun drawing skill. And we'll go for item level, let's say like somewhere in the mid-game, like 70, 72, like early mapping. Kind of early game. And like, obviously, it is a little sad that it is completely RNG in PoE. But like, knowing how to use the crafting mission stuff gives you a bit of an edge. There is also Reforge More Likely, but it's been nerfed so much I don't normally recommend Reforge More Likely from Harvest anymore. Even these are like kind of useful boots early, right? 10% MS. It depends. If you are a Leap Slam character, that's okay, right? As an open suffix for crafting. I'll give an example. Like these are really good boots. Here, now I just craft movement speed. And if I've unveiled it, I can craft movement speed and freeze immunity or movement speed and chill removal. So sometimes not having movement speed on boots can be really good. Because if I craft this, I get 20% MS. You need to unveil it. But I'll get 20% MS and I'm immune to chill. And then I get my freeze immunity from the Brine King Pantheon. So and someone in chat said, what about Onslaught? That's another great thing to pick up as well instead of movement speed. So on some characters, especially mapping characters, I actually prefer not having natural movement speed because I lose 10%. Not the end of the world. If it's this one, then you're basically gaining 10% over 30%. Because if I don't have another good way of getting Onslaught. So, and these cost 4 chaos. So very, very good to save your chaos for those. Now, another thing that I'm looking for a lot in the mid game is suppression. Like these would be really, really good boots because you want to try to get as much suppression as possible. It's very, very strong. And now I have an open suffix. So this is the kind of stuff that I'd be looking for. So, like I said, we'll always have example in the POBs we have. Magic items have up to 2 affixes, so 1 prefix or 1 suffix, and the trade will list it as 2 total. And then prefix is just what comes before the belt, suffix after. And then a lot of items will have implicits, and then you also have Eldritch implicits, which is the blue and red currency orbs. They will replace. So let's say they have fingerless gloves. They are gloves with spell damage. Sorry, spell damage. Yeah, it's 4 chaos, not 1 exalt. Fingerless gloves have spell damage on them. If you use a Eldritch Ember or Ichor or whatever, then that will remove the spell damage. You can't remove them on belts or rings. The only thing that could remove that would be Val orbs. Rare sell up to 6, 3 prefix and 3 suffixes. And then advanced mod description is that you it's a setting in UI. And you basically hold Alt on an item and it'll show you things like item level, etc. Like this helmet that we're looking at right now, if you hold Alt with mod description, you see that it actually has 6 items. Whereas it actually only looks like 5, right? Sorry, I mean, it has 5 mods, but it looks like 6. And that's because the hypothermia and the increased effect of cold elements is in the same one. So this actually has an open suffix, even though it looks like it has 6 stats. So that can be really, really important to look out for. That's enabled by default now, right? Oh, yeah, it is. It is enabled by default now. Counting the modifier shows that the helmet now has 5 modifiers with open suffix. And yeah, that'll give you a load of information, item level, etc. And ideally, you want something crafted on every slot that you can. There's no reason not to, unless it's too expensive. There are some expensive ones. Essences, like we just covered, they like guarantee 1 mod. And very important to remember that if essence is screaming or above, you do not need to scour the item first. I've seen that there's still people scouring items to use the screaming essence. Screaming acts as a chaos orb. This will also allow you to get some modifiers otherwise available. For example, if you need dexterity or intelligence on belts, that does not exist unless you use an essence. And we also have the special essences, horror, delirium, insanity, and hysteria to give you special modifiers. Now, fossils. They are, well, I guess they were used more in Kalandra than before because, Harvest got nerfed. But fossils is like build your own crafting currency. So fossils will have, they will block a group. Like for example, a dense fossil, you will not be able to roll life modifiers at all. They will just not exist. And fossils can, because of that, be extremely good for some things. Like, for example, with 4 different fossils, you can make convoking ones for minions extremely easy. I actually want to show you because it's insane how good it is. So let's see if we can find this. Is it under one-handed weapons? Convoking wand. So now I'm going to do 1 minion and 1 spell, right? And if I'm doing that with Chaos Orbs, we're literally looking at like hundreds of thousands of Chaos Orbs. Getting this on a Chaos would be so unlikely. It would be absolutely insane. However, let me show you how extremely strong it is if we use fossils. So now we're going to click on the method fossils and compute best selection. Now check this out and why they're so OP. So obviously this is something that would be worth an insane amount of money if this was the only way to craft them, right? They'd be worth literally mirrors. However, with fossils, they're actually a 1 in 18 or something. So they are incredibly achievable. Taking the cost from literal mirrors to, like, if you're lucky, sorry, it's a 1 in 12. So on average, 570 chaos. So fossil combos can be really, really good for getting some things more likely. These can also be really good for cluster jewels. There's another example that I want to do. So let's go to cluster jewels. And something I used to roll a lot on hardcore was Mage Hunter and Conjured Wall. These are massively painful. These are massively painful to roll with Harvest or anything. Like they're, let's see, what are they with Chaos Orbs? 500 on average with Chaos Orbs. And then getting that with a third good stat, really, really painful. And then let's see, even with 3 resonators, they are like actually very, very achievable. And even with 1. So with 3, they're 1 in 11. And then cost efficiency, even with Etheric and Lucent, it's 1 in 33. So that cuts the cost in 5. And last time I crafted, I got like 5 of these, just like back to back. Because 1 in 11 is obviously a lot better to hit than 1 in 500. So definitely, fossils are incredibly powerful and worth looking at. And then life gear as well is really good because when you're using pristine fossils, you're blocking all the energy shield ones. So checking out the simulator there is really good. Yeah, harvest really, really rough for gearing with now. I honestly always save it for item level 86 total. I always save it for item level 86 now. That is generally what, like, the thing I want to craft. It depends a little bit. So for example, if you're ever crafting a 2-handed physical weapon, item level 83 is slightly better than item level 86. And that lets me do a nice interlude to like why it can sometimes be good to cap the item level. So let me go back to Path of Exile and show some cool item level manipulation tricks. And depending on the league, like there are some really good ones. So the easiest item level manipulation trick is item level 2 ones. So, like I said, using an essence will force the mod on it no matter what. So let's say I have a lot of tier 3 essences, right? Boom. Now, I have a lot of these stacked up. Like, let's say I have like 70 of these or something. Now watch this. Where is it? Where is it? This is a very good endgame one. I have up to 66 spell damage, plus 1 cold, and I have cold damage over time multiplier. And the reason this is good is that at item level 2, item level 4 is not too bad too if you're going specifically for cold dot because you can roll a natural cold dot. So if you don't want to craft it, and if you want to trigger one, that would be a play too. But if you're going for a wand with plus 1 to a spell and spell damage, this is a really good way to get it. Sometimes in leagues that give you a lot of essences, I actually do this with deafenings because the +1 gems is very common. I usually get it at least every 10. So this is a really good chaos one. And now I have up to 94 spell damage, +1 chaos, and I have open suffixes. So this will still be like level 50 or 60 to use, but this is a really good crafting method for endgame ones. And this is a good example for like item level manipulation. So what I mean by that and why this is so strong is that, like I said, at item level 83, you have slightly less mods than you would on item level 86 for a physical weapon. And the only thing you care about would be merciless, right? You only care about like the physical damage stats. Can you buy from the vendor level 1 or 2 items? Yeah, so there's a couple of well, generally what you do is you make a new character and you de-level it with one wisdom, one scar, so it's the level 1, then everything from the vendor will be item level 2. And at the start of a league, and this is a especially good tip for those that are new to hardcore, you could just make a bunch of new characters, kill Halak, and check the vendor shop. Because very often you will get low level ones with +1 cold gems or +1 fire, whatever you're playing. So it can be really, really good. Let's see. So Harvest also kind of lacks a specific identity on what gear it should be used on. It's in a bit of a weird spot. I definitely prefer the current crafting method because what I disliked a lot about old Harvest was that it forces you to craft on the spot. And it really takes you out of the gameplay loop that you're currently experiencing. But I definitely would love to see a lot of buffs in how much we can craft. Maybe they'll buff it this league. So, Betrayal. Ashleen's bench augment is still very strong for high-end crafting, and she also gives you the Veiled Chaos Orbs. These can be super strong with prefixes cannot be changed, and suffixes cannot be changed. And I'll give you some cool examples of that in a second. But even her like level 4 bench, which is remove something and add something on, can be very strong still. Here, I'll show you some veiled ones. So what was I doing the most? I guess delirium rings. Let's show some delirium rings. This is a really, really cool thing. Create new ring, and hysteria rings is good. Where's rings? Jewelry. Ring. Okay, let's just do a 2-stone ring or a vermilion ring. Could be good too. Item level 86. Right. So what I'm going to do now is I would do, for example, delirium, right? And this would be really, really good for obvious reasons. So there's a couple of things you can do here. There's a couple of cool things with Veiled Chaos Rings. So one thing that's cool now is maybe you want veiled prefixes. Like maybe you want to guarantee life, or more importantly, something that's very common. A lot of people would like a ring that has life and the ability to do minus mana cost crafted, right? But how do I get both minus mana cost and life when I can't use multi-mod on the ring, which is allows you to craft multiple? Because that is a suffix in itself, and our suffixes are full. Well, this is where we have some cool, expensive crafting things. So this is a really good way. I do this a lot in SSF. I don't know how common it is in Trade League, but what we would do now is we do, the prefix craft. We go here and we find suffixes cannot be changed. Now this costs 2 divine orbs. So generally when people are like, what do you use divines or, back in the day, exalts on? And SSF, well, this would be stuff like this. So what we do now is we do a veiled and boom. So now we generally craft. Oh, I can't remember what we normally block. Is it mana or flat lightning? I'm pretty sure mana is the most efficient one, unless you actually want mana. And then once you've crafted mana before unveiling, that blocks the most. And I think it's a 5 out of 6 or 5 out of 7 chance to unveil life. So now we have up to 60 life on the ring. And generally when you're already going to do this expensive crafting, you would very likely have 4 fertile catalysts on this. So it would already be like it would be like what, 65 life? Something like that. And now we do actually have a ring where we can, boom. So now I have a ring with 60 life, 15% damage over time multiplier, and we have the -8 if we have the fertile catalysts and good rest, right? And there are other ones too. There are other ones too. I've actually done this a lot. And you could exalt the last one. Okay, we'll exalt the last one. 10 evasion. Excellent. So there's another outcome. Or there's another thing. What I just showed is the most reasonable, right? You're most likely getting that when you're using 2 divines. I'm going to show you another cool outcome that I really like, that I use a lot, with Veiled Chaos Orbs. So sometimes you will get... I've done this successfully a few times. You know what? Let's just make the ring example I want. Oh, this kind of works. Actually, let me know the suffix. Okay. Yeah, this works. No, wait. Actually, it doesn't. Hold on. Let me get one that I can actually use for the example. So I want 2 good... Actually, I'll just make one. It'll be easier. I'll just make one. Let me annul off the other stats. Because it's a pretty cool example of high risk, high reward. How do you know what tiers are on the items? Hold Alt. Right. Add a suffix. So, sometimes veiled things have really, really good stats. So let's say that I want like a really, really high resist one, right? No, not crafted. Actual. So this is really, really cool suffixes, right? I now have 15% damage over time and 16 all rest. That's actually pretty good. Now, sometimes I've had leagues where I've had a ton of exalts when this used exalts or a ton of divines. And then there's a very high risk reward thing I can do when trying to craft really endgame gear that I think is really interesting and teaches you a lot about crafting in Path of Exile. So, I'm now going to do suffixes cannot be changed. And I'm going to do the Veiled Chaos Orb. Now, you would probably think that it'll keep the essence and it'll keep the suffix and it'll keep the last one clear. But it won't. Because prefixes and suffixes cannot be changed. All that means is that the existing ones cannot be changed. And that is the important lesson that I want you to learn here. Because this will now add a 3rd one at random. And that isn't very intuitive. Now, it can be a bad thing, but it can also be a really good thing. So this scenario that just happened now, this is effectively bricked. Unless I really wanted Dex, then it would be great. Now I would craft mana. We can unveil without, and you'll see we most likely not get life. Whereas if I do craft life, we can give a quick example here. Craft mana, sorry, and then unveil. It's like, boom, now I actually get life. So blocking the mana, huge chance of life. But that's not what I want to show you. That's what I wanted to show you. Now, this is quite... There's nothing I can do to improve these odds. But now I have the tier 1 dot multi, tier 1 res, and have a veiled suffix. And we have a couple of things depending on the build we're playing. Ideally, you want to do this if you have a lot of good outcomes, right? So for example, I could now get minimum frenzy charge, I get minimum power charge, I get endurance, and maybe there are other things I really need too. So now, if this was happening live, I'd be like, oh, dude, we hit it! Because this is huge, right? This is 12% damage reduction while mapping, or 16% if I have access to +1 endurance charge. And the other ones are really good too. Strength and Dex, really, really good outcome. Minimum endurance, really good outcome. And lightning and chaos. So you have some really cool outcomes here. And we can try doing multiple unveils, and you can see that more often than not, you're getting some pretty good outcomes when you actually get the veiled suffix. Now we have Frenzy, Power, and Cold and Chaos. Endurance, Lightning, Chaos, and Cold and Chaos. See, it's like very often giving you pretty cool choices. So yes, this is very expensive, but it's cool to know that's how crafting works. Now, an interesting thing that I want to show you, just in case somebody ends up with a lot of currency this league, or one league, and wants to do even more. What about this? Zizaran, what if you combine the 2 steps you just showed us? And I'm like, okay. What if we try that? I tried this live, by the way. I lost currency. That doesn't work. So when an item has a veiled stat like that, you cannot use the veiled. You can use Jun, I believe. I think Jun can still give you 2 veiled modifiers. So if you have a veiled modifier, you can still get 1 for Jun or 2 from Jun. Can't actually remember. I don't use Jun that much myself anymore because it's kind of high risk. But Jun doesn't work anymore either? Okay, never mind. Sorry, I meant Ashlyn, not Jun. Doesn't work. Okay, so they nerfed that too. Ashlyn can naturally give you 2. Yeah, I wasted on that too. Now, a thing you can do, however, and this is a lot riskier after the harvest nerf, because back in the day, we could do the keep prefixes, keep suffixes that we still have currency for, but you cannot use that currency on rings. So now you can slap 55 life on this and you can be excited. But there's more. You can also, if you're a risky business, you can do reforged life. What's happening here? Okay, there. Wasn't selecting it properly. So now it'll keep all the suffixes and it'll guarantee life. And the only life stat is actual life and leech. Now, this is fine and you can do this repeatedly as long as it doesn't, boom. Here you're screwed. Now you are screwed, chat. And now you have to annul and boom, you lost the suffix. It's all over. Throw everything to the wall. It's all over. Ah! Grab the microphone and scream. So that is, and that's an important lesson to learn in PoE. A lot of it is RNG, and you know you want to figure out like where are you and stuff like that. But yeah, so VLTLs are very cool. Eldritch currencies, Icarus and Ember, and there's 1 for each color. Eater of the World has blue, Staring Exarch has red, and it adds Eldritch Influence implicit modifiers, 1 for each color. Colors are separate and roll implicit separately, and there are 6 tiers. The highest 2 are only obtained with the Orb of Conflict. So you could have 1 tier 6 and 1 tier 4, but you cannot have 1 6 and 1 5. You could have 2 5s though. I think. Math. Yes. Counts as Eldritch Influence and cannot be used on items with other influence. So if you find a Crusader, Warlord, etc., you cannot use it on that. And then that only works on body armor, gloves, helmet, and boots, and it will override the existing implicits. That means that if you have 2-toned boots, they will lose the resist if you use currency on it. That is usually worth it, though, very often. So let's give some cool examples of Eldritch currency. So let's create an item. Let's say that I have some nice boots. And yeah, Dragon Scale is generally the best there. And it's not influenced. It's item level 100 because why not? And let's say that I've gotten some very nice endgame boots. Let's show what some very nice endgame boots look like for me. So I would there. And then the number 1 thing I care about is tier 1 spell suppression. That's what I want the most. And then I have a crafted prefix. And then I would either have chill immunity or onslaught. Very, very often. So these are my boots. And then generally then with Eldritch currency, which there. So honestly, even the lessers are very good. We can look through it here and you see like some of them are just like things like lightning resist, but there are some that are really, really good, like +1 max. That's the movement speed, 20% movement speed. Effect of golems. Onslaught effect, that's not bad at all. Movement speed, but there's one that's even better. My favorite. Okay, there's a stat that's called action speed. It's pretty much just better for everything. It gives you movement speed. It makes everything faster. It does not make your totems faster if you're explosive arrow champion, but it makes just everything better. It is the best stat in the game. Yeah, and you're poor now. Actually, like there's really examples PoE really. Now normally what you want to do and what I do before using my currencies, and I still do this because they're relatively new, is I would Google PoEDB and then boots. And then I will click on it and I will find the menu where it says Icor or Eater World's currency. And I will look at each piece and I'll be like, because you're not going to have a shit ton early, right? Sometimes you might have to fix your gloves first, or your boots, or your chest, right? Sometimes, like for example, on helmet, Lesser Ichor can give you mana reservation, which could be the make or break between you being able to use your spell or not, or between able to reserve something. On gloves, different currencies can give you like poison chance or proliferation, right? So like letting your shock or freeze or ignite spread. So there's some really, really strong, even on the cheap ones. And then on the exceptional ones, you have some very, very strong ones too. This is like, honestly, you will very likely not use these, but there are some good ones that are worth knowing about. Like, for example, +3 max res and things like that. Normally, these, at least for me, are used for the... Oh, right. And now we would need to do Orb of Conflict. Oh. So, like, once you've spammed Orb of Conflict... Oh, yeah, it's just 2 on boots. It's 3 on chest. But now you see like the Orb of Conflict, it ate the other one and it upgraded this to tier 2. And there are really, really strong things like that today. But there are, other than just having really good implicits, there are other things that these currencies are really good for. So let's give another example. Is there a way for me to get incursion mods in Path of Exile without importing? I wonder. Anyone know? I wonder. Can I get incursion? I can. Okay, cool. So let's say that I find this, right? There's a couple of outcomes we'll show. There's a couple of outcomes. So one thing that could happen is, let me show. I get the hybrid life with actual Guatzaletis or whatever it's called. And this, right? Like this is devastating. It has 140 life, open prefix. So I can actually craft, let me open the crafting bench. I can actually craft even more life. So this could be the prefixes, right? Look at that life. 150 life basically, and 8% life, 8% mana. That's like beautiful prefixes. And these drop from incursion, right? This is an incursion item. They will also sometimes drop off percentage armor rewards or like armor rewards from other league mechanics. So this is really good. And this is a chest. You'll actually find these fairly commonly. But now what? The suffixes are bricked. I really need resists on my build. Well, we can fix it. So we have special Chaos Exalt and Null orbs from these. They're actually quite rare, but you can buy them on Trade League and you will find them eventually on SSF. Now, what we would do in this case is we would use a blue essence, if I remember right. Yes. Oh, thank fuck. And what that now that we've only used the blue essence and we haven't used the red one, or if we use the red one and a bigger blue essence, blue is now dominant. Either of those work. Ichor, whatever. And then we have Chaos, Exalt, and Annul. So A, we could annul something. However, if we use a Chaos, boom. Now we just wipe the suffixes. They're open now. Now this is actually really good. Because now we could potentially multi-mod. So we could do multi-mod, we could do the percentage life, and we could do another resist. We could also exalt now, because this is all really good. And if that was 46 fire, that'd be great. But now we're sort of back to where we started. So there's like loads of good outcomes you could get. And more importantly, it will unblock an item that was completely like suffix or prefix locked. So keep these in mind. Like annul and chaos are really good for like unblocking an item. And yeah, they range from like, you know, marginally usable, like 13 fire rest to like I said, things like that are build enabling like prolif or chance to poison. You can get spell suppression on your gloves, and a lot of them get like really good at higher levels. So yeah. And sadly, at the end of the day, PoE crafting is mostly RNG, but with Craft of Exile, honestly, Craft of Exile is the best tool. Absolutely the best tool for how to like learn. Do we have any questions pertaining to gearing? On the topic of gearing, could you explain how to correctly use Gwenin and further down the road, gamble for currency? Well, Gwenin is usually just used for base types. Once your character hits level 90, Gwenin will sell you item level 86. Can you show where to find Acres on PoEDB? So I'm struggling with crashing with loading up different things at the moment. So actually, no. If you search for PoEDB and gloves, one of them should have a tab that shows it. I could maybe try. We can try in this tab. Alright, let's hope I don't crash. PoEDB gloves. There's one of these options. Is that one? Yes. So glove strength. Now you can see here, Angstar and Eater Worlds. And then it'll show there. Yeah, drop starting monitor. Can you explain what the convert physical to elemental on gloves can have? 2 of these mods. If you have an incursion mod and the implicit, yeah, you can have 2 of those. And then Tuyen and stuff, I just buy whatever currency I need. But yeah, Gwenin I normally just use for base types and uniques. No, we haven't covered rug crafting in this. Oh, all the special incursion resist things, like the glove conversion or the glove damage and amulet thing, like these special incursion mods, if you use harvest resist change, they will actually swap the entire incursion mod. So that's very strong. This will be a YouTube video, yeah. No, Foxfrost. What bases would you alch for profit at start? Jewelry. And whatever is like super meta. Yeah, PoEDB gloves. And then PoEDB helmet. PoEDB chest. Good base is pretty important. Even on armor innovation, like all that stuff really, really adds up. Like I always look when I was new to crafting, I would Google like Path of Exile gloves and I would check the good wiki. I can't remember. Not the bad wiki. What's the good wiki called again? PoEwiki.net. That's the good one. The other one's not updated. But yeah, we would do that. So I would look at like types and stuff. Like the lowest one listed isn't always the best. Like, I think Eternal Burkinae is listed lower than Royal Burkinae, but Royal Burkinae is better. Anyway, I think that's all the gearing questions we have. So thanks for watching. If you have feedback, we have a feedback form in the description down below. And yeah, thanks for watching. try to die. Oh, and sub if you like the video. And try to die less than I